The date is June the 13th, 1994, and the time is 13:35 hours. And we're here with OJ Simpson. Is that Orenthal James Simpson?
911 emergency.
Can you get someone over here now, please?
Well, okay, what does he look like?
He's OJ Simpson. I think you know his record. First of all, he broke the back door down to get in.
The body of 34-year-old Nicole Brown Simpson, ex-wife of OJ Simpson, was found after midnight on the sidewalk outside her West Los Angeles home.
These two young people didn't deserve to die, and they didn't deserve to die in that manner.
Simpson told police he was in Chicago at the time of the killings.
The Los Angeles Police Department hastens to add there is a presumption of innocence, and that's very important.
Police escorted him to the rear of the building, and a short time later, Simpson was seen in handcuffs.
There is a rather amazing story developing in Los Angeles this hour where California Highway Patrol is in pursuit of a white Ford Bronco, a car that was reported to be one that might contain O.J. Simpson and a friend earlier today.
Police will not say whether Simpson is a suspect in the killing.
All right, Mr. Simpson, would you please stand and face the jury?
It doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
In the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, we, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Orenthal James Simpson, not guilty of the crime of murder.
That you will not ask me another question about the case.
I will never ask you again.
We won't have to talk about it anymore.
Just did you do it?
No, I didn't.
This is OJ Simpson in his words. It's episode 3, which is not the place to start. Obviously, if you haven't listened to episodes 1 and episodes 2 yet, I would do that. This is a different type of true crime podcast. We're listening to the entire interview between the police and OJ Simpson, which happened the day after his ex-wife was murdered. And it looks at the words that OJ uses in this interview to get an insight into what was going on in his mind at the time, to see if we can get to the truth. It's also a podcast where you'll learn skills that you can apply to your everyday life, looking at the words that your friends, your family, and your colleagues use. So we're inside that interview room in 1994. Instead of giving the facts of the case as researched on Wikipedia, we're hearing it all from the man himself. And what have we learned so far? Well, we've learned that OJ is painting a picture of his relationship with Nicole and how they were at the time she was murdered. We've noted some discrepancies in OJ's timelines. He's trying to get across an image that he and Nicole were getting on well. He's also been downplaying his previous domestic violence incidents with Nicole. In fact, he's tried to lie at points, but he's a very bad liar. I've also picked up that there's potentially some bad feeling happened between them the night before at the dance recital they both attended. Now, all of these things, they don't make him guilty of murder. Potentially, this is just a guy who's extremely worried that his past behaviour and his history with Nicole is going to make him the prime suspect in her murder. That would worry me. It would worry him. More interesting, though, is that he's very sensitive around the use of the car, the Ford Bronco, the previous day and the night of the murder. And he's very deflective around the timings of things that he did the night before, the night Nicole was murdered. That's worrying. And there's more deflecting, there's more deception, and there's vagueness around what he did the night that Nicole and her friend Ron Goldman were murdered. The email address is oj@neveratruerword.com. This works great as a collaboration, so give me your thoughts, give me your opinions, give me your questions. oj@neveratruerword.com. And when we come to the last episode of this podcast series, it would be great to get your thoughts and your opinions on that episode as well. So let's jump back inside that interview room in 1994. We've got Detectives Van Atter and Lang asking OJ the questions, and they're interested once more in what he was doing on the night of the murder and what he was driving.
So yesterday you did drive the white Bronco.
He's asked, yesterday you did drive the white Bronco, and there's OJ's favourite response again, is a noise that OJ seems to use when he's thinking internally. He wants to make a sound out loud, but his brain is taken up with so much processing inside about what's going on here, because he's very sensitive about this use of the white Bronco. I think he's potentially, what's coming next, or what do I say here? So when he's asked, was he using the white Bronco yesterday, he says, there's a where is this going feel to that answer. Detective Lang continues the questioning.
About what time, where did you park it when you brought it home?
Well, the first time probably by the mailbox I'm trying to think. I told that I bring it in the driveway. Normally, I will park it by the mailbox sometimes.
So he's asked, where did you park it when you brought it home? And Simpson says, well, the first time probably by the mailbox. I'm trying to think. Or did I bring it in the driveway? Normally, I will park it by the mailbox sometimes. The very beginning of this answer puts me on alert. OJ starts with and as we've seen in past answers to questions, means OJ is thinking hard about what it is that he wants to say. And you can hear when he's answering here, he is thinking hard. He is choosing his words very carefully. Why is that? Why is where did you park the car a hard question for him to answer? I think we'll find out as the interview goes on. He says, well. As I've said before in this podcast series, when someone starts an answer with well, it puts me on alert. It puts me on alert that a story is going to be told. He says, well, the first time probably by the mailbox. Now, that's fine. If you parked your car on the street maybe yesterday, you wouldn't remember exactly where you parked it, but OJ's thinking very hard about where he parked it. In fact, he tells us, I'm trying to think. And then he says, or did I bring it in the driveway? Now, remember how OJ spoke about timing in episode 2? He would give answers that covered a lot of ground. The recital finished 7, quarter to 7, quarter past 7, 8 o'clock, that sort of thing. It gives him a lot of room to say, oh, I didn't lie. I just said it happened sometime between 7 and 9 o'clock. Here, he's covering all bases again. I parked it by the mailbox, or did I bring it into the driveway? Wherever it's found that OJ parked the car, whether it's out on the street by the mailbox or whether it's in the driveway, he has told the truth. He's just not committed to one answer, potentially just trying to be able to get away with things. And then he says, normally I will park it by the mailbox sometimes. So he's asked, where did you park the car when you brought it home yesterday? And he's ended the answer by telling us where he parks the car normally, not where he parked the car yesterday. He's just telling us where he parked the car normally. And even worse, he says, normally I will park it by the mailbox sometimes. Normally, I will park it by the mailbox sometimes. Do you park it by the mailbox normally? Or do you park it by the mailbox sometimes, as in occasionally? It's not a very direct answer, that one. In fact, he gives us 2 options. There's so many options in this one answer. Where did he park the car? It's not clear. Was it by the mailbox? Was it in the driveway? Normally he parks it by the mailbox. Sometimes he parks it by the mailbox. And he contradicts an earlier answer. Earlier on in the interview, he said he always parks it on the street. He was very certain about that. I always park it on the street. So what is going on in there? I think the truth is leaking out versus the story that he wants to tell. And he also wants to be so vague and general so as to be able to say, yeah, I didn't lie. I told the truth. I just covered off 20 options on my way to get to the truth. The detectives tried to pin him down.
Ashford or Ashland? On Ashford, yeah.
Where did you park it yesterday for the last time, you remember?
Right where it is.
Okay. Where it is now?
Yeah.
Where on...
Right on the street there.
Not on Ashford?
No, on Rockman.
You parked it, right?
Yes.
Well, what time was it?
8 something, maybe 7, 8 o'clock. 8, 9 o'clock. I don't know, right in that.
Okay, so Lang says, on Ashford or Ashland, he's asking about where OJ left the car. And Simpson says, on Ashford, yeah. And Lang then says, where did you park the car yesterday for the last time? Do you remember? And Simpson says, right where it is. Lang says, where it is now? And Simpson says, yeah. Lang says, where on? Simpson says, right on the street there. Lang says, on Ashford. And Simpson says, no, on Rockingham. You parked it there? OJ says, yes. About what time was that? And OJ says, 8 something, 7, 8, 9 o'clock. I don't know, right in that area. Well, let's start with the end. Again, OJ being real vague with his times, asked what time did he park the car there last night, and he said 8 something, 7, 8, 9 o'clock. Almost 3 hours of possibilities right there. 7, 8, 9 o'clock. I don't know, right in that area. Again, a really vague time span from OJ, and you can see here when he's asked a simple question, what time did you get in last night and where did you park your car? The answer is far from clear. Why is that? There is a huge pause as well when he's asked what time that he parked the car. Listen to the length of it.
Well, what time was it?
8 something, 8, 9 o'clock. I don't know, right in that.
So the timing there, and this is OJ being asked about what he was doing on the night that his ex-wife and her friend were murdered. And the timing there is causing him real stress. If you were thinking really hard about an answer about what time you parked your car last night, then you thought so hard about it you had left a huge pause. Would your answer then be vague? 8 something, 7, 8, 9 o'clock, I don't know, right in that area. We've got all the common themes here with OJ, the markers of stress, the pauses, the ums, the ahs around the Bronco, and a vagueness on times, especially the timings of things on the night that Nicole was murdered. Talking of times, do you remember the various times OJ said the dance recital finished at from episode 2? It changes again in the next question.
Okay, did you take it to the recital?
No.
Okay, what time was the recital?
Over at about 6:30. They said I came home, I got my car, I was going to see my girlfriend, I was calling her, and she wasn't around.
Lang asks OJ, did you take it to the recital? And it there is the Ford Bronco. OJ says no. Lang says, what time was the recital? And OJ says, over at about 6:30. Like I said, I came home, I got my car, I was going to see my girlfriend, I was calling her and she wasn't around. Now, he was asked what time was the recital. He doesn't say what time the recital was. He says what time the recital was over at. So he replies over at 6:30. So he doesn't directly answer the question. But then again, he adds more to the answer, information that he wasn't asked for. So he's asked what time was the recital. He said it was over about 6:30. And then he repeats his story again. That suggests to me it's really important that he gets across his story to the detectives of what he did last night. Like I said, I came home, I got my car, I was going to see my girlfriend, I was calling her and she wasn't around. Now, it's possible, it's really possible that OJ has done something the night before that he does not want the police to know about. This is not necessarily murdering someone. This could be cheating on his girlfriend. This could be going to buy drugs. This could be going to some nightclub that he did not want the police to know that he'd been at. So he's constructed a story that he's going to tell the police, his alibi basically of what he was doing. And because it's made up, when we do that, we tend to feel it won't be believed because it is flimsy, because it's not true. So we think that by repeating it over and over and over again, people will start to believe it. And I think this is what's going on with OJ here, if I'm being honest, because he's asked about the time of the recital and he gives his story, his alibi again for the night in question. We have to ask why he feels it important to get across this story, even when he wasn't being asked what he did last night. He's telling the police what he did last night. And by the way, what I was doing last night was nothing. Nothing bad happened. In episode 1, I said, I'm not going to pick up on slight misspeaks. I'm not going to be so pedantic. I'm going to pick on single answers. I'm looking for repeated themes in his behaviour with words. And time again, when he's asked a question about last night, a specific question about last night, he contributes more information. He tells this story about what he was doing last night. There's a pattern there. Let's get back to the interview.
So you got home in the Rolls, and then you got in the Bronco.
Because my phone was in the Bronco.
Okay.
And because it's a Bronco, it's what I drive. Yeah. You know, I'd rather drive it than any other car. And as I was going over there, I called her a couple of times and she wasn't there. And she had left a message. When I checked my message, she had left me a message and she wasn't there. And she had to leave town. And then I came back and ended up sitting with Cato.
OJ's asked, so you came home in the Rolls and then you got in the Bronco. And OJ replies, in the Bronco, because my phone was in the Bronco. And because it's a Bronco. It's a Bronco. It's what I drive, you know. I'd rather drive it than any other car. And, you know, as I was going over there, I called her a couple of times and she wasn't there. And I left a message. And then I checked my messages and there were no new messages. She wasn't there and she may have to leave town. Then I came back and ended up sitting with Cato. So it's there again. He's asked which car he drove last night. So you drove home in the Rolls and you went out in the Bronco. And OJ replies that he went out in the Bronco and then he starts telling us his movements last night again. He wasn't asked about his movements. He was asked which car he was in. But he's telling us this story again about what happened last night. There's some flesh on the phone calls. Previously, he just said, I was calling her and she wasn't there, not she didn't answer. And once again, he is saying she wasn't there, but then he's saying I left a message and I checked my messages and there were no new messages. Another thing here with OJ, I think, is when he gets an easy question, I think that there's a relief in him. I've got an easy question so I can talk more, which is why I think he's like, it's a Bronco, it's what I drive, you know? And then, I called her a couple of times and she left her a message and then I checked my messages. I think it's a delaying tactic from OJ there. This is an easy question. I've got things to say. I can talk about how much I like Broncos. I can talk about how many phone calls I made. This is not going to cause me stress to talk about these things. But again, going back to the phone call, when he says his girlfriend wasn't there, I want to know how he knows that. It was just that she didn't answer. He doesn't know that she wasn't there. Potentially, he didn't make those phone calls, which is why his wording around it doesn't hang together well. And then I spot OJ in his words here covering something up. He says after this back and forth around messages, then I came back and ended up sitting with Cato. Now, is something, it's one of those noises, and when OJ makes one of those noises like or ah or I'm looking at what comes next because he's thinking about what it is that he's going to say, or there's a bit of stress there from him thinking about those events. And he's saying, ended up sitting with Cato, and ended up suggests that he's skipping over some time. Then I came back and ended up sitting with Cato. So he's hiding something there. He's jumping in time. Think about it. I might say, I was going out for a meal last night. I couldn't find anywhere to sit in and eat, so we ended up getting a takeaway. So when I've used ended up there, I'm covering all the decisions that we had to make or the movements that we had to make to go from trying to get a sit-in meal to getting a takeout. If I said I wanted to watch a new film, but I ended up watching Pulp Fiction for the 30th time, I've jumped time there. I haven't told you about me trying to find a new film but I couldn't find anything I wanted to watch, or the one I wanted to watch, my other half didn't want to watch, so we ended up watching Pulp Fiction for the 30th time. Ended up jumps time, it skips over detail. So there's something he's not telling us here. He came back and ended up sitting with Cato. What happened in between him coming back and sitting with Cato? OJ doesn't say, and we have to ask why he didn't say. Our detectives are obviously gluttons for punishment because they're going to ask OJ a question about timings again.
Okay. And about what time was this again that you parked the Bronco?
8 something. Relatively. He hadn't done a jacuzzi. We had went and got a burger, and I'd come home and kind of leisurely got ready to go. We had done a few things.
He's asked by Detective Lang, okay, what time was this again that you parked the Bronco? And OJ says, 8 something, maybe. Again, one of these really vague times. 8 something is, there's an hour. There's an hour to play with there in 8 something. And then it's just 8 something, maybe. So what have we got? 2 hours worth of potential times there that something could have happened from OJ. He then goes on to say he hadn't done a jacuzzi. We had went and got a burger and I'd come home and kind of leisurely got ready to go. We'd done a few things. So once again, OJ has answered more than he was asked. He was asked, what time did you park the Bronco? He says 8 something maybe. And then he goes on to tell a story about the night. Interestingly, a story he hasn't told about the night before. This is Cato, hadn't done a jacuzzi, then they went and got a burger, and then he got ready to go. Remember, he went to Chicago later on that evening, so he kind of leisurely got ready to go. And then he says, we'd done a few things. Boy, this answer is complex. It's going to take quite a while to pull apart, and I'm sure I'm not going to catch everything in this. He's asked about timings, and it's 8 something, slightly different from the answer that he gave before, which was 7, 8, 9, something in that area. The time has changed, and what he was doing has changed. Paula has disappeared now, so what is going on in here? Did he realize that he gives lots of time unaccounted for? So he feels so far his account it doesn't fill the entire gap. So he has to say more, hence why Cato and the burgers are mentioned. And he leisurely got ready to go. I want you to remember that. He leisurely got ready to go. Although it was kind of leisurely, only kind of leisurely. Remember earlier, and he's going to say it again in this interview, he said he was rushing around getting ready to go. He said I was trying to give this impression that he was in a mad rush when the limo came. But here, all of a sudden, he's telling us it was kind of leisurely that in the manner that he got ready to go there. And then he says, I mean, we done a few things. I mean, from OJ, we spotted before, comes up in deception, that he says something that's not quite true. And then he says, I mean, and he qualifies what he said before. So he says, I mean, we done a few things. But he doesn't explain what those few things are. There's no meat on the bones there. Why is that? Why can he not tell us what he had done the night before? This talk of leisurely getting ready for the night out has interested the detectives as much as it's interested me.
You weren't in a hurry when you came back up with the white Bronco?
No.
The reason I ask you, the car is parked kind of at a funny angle. It's stuck out the street.
It's parked because, I don't know if it's a funny angle or what. It's parked because when I was hustling at the end of the day to get all my stuff, and I was getting my phone and everything off it, I just pull it, you bring it out of the gate there. It's a tight turn.
Detective Lang asks OJ, you weren't in a hurry when you came back with the Bronco? And OJ says no. Then Lang says, the reason I asked you, the cars were parked at a funny angle, stuck out in the street. And OJ says, well, there's that word again. Well, it's parked because I don't know if it's a funny angle or what. It's parked because when I was hustling at the end of the day to get all my stuff and I was getting my phone and everything out of it, I just pulled it out of the gate there. It's a tight turn. Okay, so OJ was getting ready leisurely, but then he said he was hustling at the end of the day. So he was in a rush or he wasn't in a rush. It's not quite clear, OJ. And once again, a lot more detail. He's asked, why is the car parked at a funny angle? If he'd said, it's a tight turn, that's all it takes to answer that question. If that is the genuine answer, it's a tight turn. But that's the last thing that OJ says. There's just lots of justification as to why the car is parked at a funny angle. He kind of starts to agree. He says, well, it's parked because... And then he says, I don't know if it's a funny angle or what. And then he tells us why it is parked at a funny angle, because he was hustling at the end of the day. And then he tells us he was getting his stuff out of it and he's getting his phone and everything out of it. And I just pulled out of the gate there. Oh, and by the way, it's a tight turn. So why was that car parked at a funny angle? I don't know, but I don't believe OJ's explanation there at all. Way, way too much storytelling going on there.
So you had it inside the compound? OJ, what?
I brought it inside the compound.
Okay.
To get my stuff out of it.
Okay.
You know, and then you brought it out. I put it out and I run back in the gate before the gate closes. Okay.
Lang says, so you had it inside the compound then. Now remember, previously OJ could not remember what he'd done with the car, but now he's told us, yeah, I had it inside the compound and I drove it out and parked it at that funny angle. So Lang picks up on that and says, so you had it inside the compound then? OJ says, yeah. Lang says, oh, okay. OJ then starts to tell a story again. He explains himself when he hasn't been asked to. I brought it inside the compound to get my stuff out of it, and then I put it out and I'd run back inside the gate before the gate closes. So there's contradiction with his earlier words there where he said he couldn't remember if he'd taken the car in or not. Here he's saying, yeah, I took it in because I was getting my stuff out of it. And the end's interesting. The end, he talks in general. He doesn't talk about the night in question. He says, I'd run back inside before the gate closes. So it's not, I put it out and then I ran back inside before the gate closed. He says, I put it out and then I'd run back inside before the gate closes. So I don't think that's what happened last night. I think that's OJ remembering what he does in general or what he's done a few times before, and he's bringing that to the story. What do you think so far? It's OJ@neveratruerword.com. OJ@neveratruerword.com. That email address is in the show notes and it comes through to my phone, which is right there. You never know when you might make my pocket buzz by sending me an email, OJ@neveratruerword.com, with your questions or your observations on the words that OJ Simpson uses in this police interview. So we're at the end of the section where the detectives have asked about the car the night before, and interestingly, really, they have only asked him about the car and the timings that he used the car, but OJ has given us so much more information about what he did the night before. Why is that? So an entire series of questions about that last night and the car use, and a lot of patterns. Vagueness on times, real sensitivity around his use of the Bronco, and a sense of a need to explain, to offer information that he wasn't asked, to picture paint or to tell a story that he's prepared previously and something that he needs to get out. Also, for the first time, I'm really spotting things being hidden. When he said he ended up with Cato, when he said that he was trying to phone his girlfriend and she wasn't there, and when he talks about doing stuff or getting stuff out of the car. And he started to contradict himself as well, contradict what he did with the car, contradict what he can remember about the car. These really long, wordy answers to the questions set my alarm bells ringing as to what's going on here, and compare how he's answered those questions to how he answers this next one.
OJ, what's your office phone number?
820 is on the WhatsApp.
5702?
Yes.
And is that area code 310?
Yes.
So he's asked, what's your office phone number? And OJ gives the number. He's asked, is that area code 310? And OJ says, yes. So he can answer a question. He can answer a question really simply. And we've seen it before. So why, when he's asked certain other questions, why does he evade? Why does he offer more? Why does he contradict himself? When I started this journey, I said I'll be honest and open-minded. So if I didn't see lies and deceptions in his words, I would say I find OJ honest in this interview. Well, that's honest OJ answering that question about the phone number. The answers about things he did the previous night when Nicole and Ron were murdered, they're miles away from this format. Now, being vague about the night doesn't mean that he murdered Ron and Nicole. It suggests he's hiding something. But, you know, as I said, maybe he was doing drugs, seeing someone that wasn't his girlfriend, or something else he doesn't want the police or the world to know. However, the interview takes a turn. The detectives have noticed something that concerns them. OJ has a cut on his hand.
How did you get the injury on your hand?
I don't know. Not the first. I know how it felt when I was in Chicago. I know how, but at the house I was just running around.
Manata asks OJ, how did you get the injury on your hand? And OJ says, I don't know. The first time when I was in Chicago and all, but at the house I was just running around. Now, previously I've said I don't know is honest in general, but in this one, I don't believe that I don't know is his truthful answer here. And this is similar to his answer when he was asked, were you ever arrested? And he says, no, I was never arrested, but there was a time where an incident happened, i.e. I have been arrested. So he says, I don't know. And then he says, the first time when I was in Chicago and all, but at the house, I was just running around. It's not coherent. So when he's asked, how did you get the injury on your hand? OJ says, I don't know. And then he tells 2 times where he injured his hand. It's not coherent. There's definitely some sort of deception going here. And he says the first time he was in Chicago and at the house he was just running around. He's going to reverse that order shortly and say that the first time was at the house and then he reopened the wound in Chicago. So there's not coherence here at all. He says at the house, I was just running around, and just is a word that covers up a lot of things. In this context, I think just means there was more happening. There wasn't just running around going on. I don't know what just is hiding, but I do know that he is hiding something there with that just. So look at the observations that I've had so far. The vagueness of the night before, and now we're talking about a cut that OJ has on his hands. He has a cut on his hands the day after his ex-wife and her friend have been stabbed to death. And his answer there, I didn't like that answer. He says he doesn't know how he got the cut on his hands, and then he says 2 incidents where he got the cut on his hand. The detectives press on, talking about the hand.
How did you do it in Chicago?
I broke the glass. You had one of you guys that just called me, and I was in the bathroom, and I just kind of went bonkers for a little bit.
He's asked, how did you do it in Chicago? OJ's reply is, I broke a glass. One of you guys just called me, and I was in the bathroom, and I just kind of went bonkers for a little bit. So I broke a glass. How did you cut your hand in Chicago? I broke a glass. That's not a description of how a hand gets injured. I could break a glass. I could throw one out the window that's next to me now. That would not cut my hand. So I don't believe that I broke a glass. That's not a description of how he got injured. That's a description of something that happened. I smashed a glass, picked up the pieces and it cut my hand, or I crushed a glass in my hand and that, oh man, that would hurt. But he doesn't say that. He only says, I broke a glass. But he does say he caused the injury because he's asked, how did you do it? And it's, I broke a glass. Interesting point. Again, though, with this, I think it's story time from OJ because he doesn't say how he broke the glass or how the broken glass injured him. And also, we've got the word just here again. I just kind of went bonkers for a little bit. If you're keeping notes, I want you to remember that phrase, went bonkers. It will become relevant in another episode of this podcast. But look at how he's minimizing how mad he went. Just kind of went bonkers for a little bit. So just means small, tiny, kind of means not really, and a little bit. But another question about how OJ got the injury on his hand, and another answer where I'm spotting deception.
Is that how you cut it? It was cut before, but I think I just opened it again. I'm not sure. You was going there, honey.
Lang says, is that how you cut it? And OJ says, it was cut before, but I think I just opened it again. I'm not sure. So we've got the which I think is OJ thinking there's too much going on in his mind to actually say words at the same time, so he makes a noise, so he feels like he's answering the question, And this is where he contradicts himself, because in that previous answer he said the first time was in Chicago and then he was running around the house. Here he's saying the hand injury happened before he was in Chicago, and when he was in Chicago he opened it up again. I'm not sure this is truthful. You can see once again OJ's being really vague. He's telling a story that's open to all sorts of possibilities.
Do you recall bleeding at all in your truck in the Bronco?
I recall bleeding at my house, and then I went to the Bronco. The last thing I did before I left, when I was rushing, was went and got my phone out of the Bronco.
Mm-hmm.
Lang says to OJ, do you recall bleeding at all in your truck in the Bronco? And OJ says, I recall bleeding at my house, and then I went to the Bronco. The last thing I did before I left, when I was rushing, was went and got my phone out of the Bronco. Be wary when someone says, I remember doing something, or I recall doing this, rather than just straight out saying, this is what happened. It's frequently when someone says, I remember doing something, or I recall doing this, there's an element of construction happening. Why do they have to tell us they remember it happening? Why don't they just tell us what happened? Although here, to be fair to OJ, he's mirroring the frame of the question. He's asked, do you recall bleeding at all at your truck in the Bronco? And he says, I recall bleeding at my house. Once more, OJ answers more than he's asked to here, and he doesn't really take on the question directly. So he could have answered, do you recall bleeding at all in your truck in the Bronco? He could have said, no, I don't. Or he could have said, yeah, I was bleeding when I went to get my phone. He doesn't answer the question directly, but he gives more information. The last thing I did before I left, when I was rushing, not leisurely again, was went and got my phone out of the Bronco. You don't have to tell us why you were at the car, OJ. You've mentioned many times why you were at the Bronco. And so now, this is almost a classic OJ question, because I can see sensitivity about the bleeding, and I can see sensitivity around the Bronco once again.
So whatever that is.
Where's the phone now?
In my bag.
Oh, you have it?
In that black bag.
You brought a bag with you?
Well,
yeah, it's in my car.
Okay.
Lang says, where's the phone now? And OJ says, in my bag. Lang says, you have it? And Simpson finishes off for him saying, in that black bag. Lang says, you brought a bag with you here? And Simpson says, yeah, it's... OJ's not telling any stories here. Where's the phone now? In my bag. You have it? In that black bag. You brought a bag with you? Yeah, it's... Look at how short his answers are. OJ's being truthful here. Why? When he's asked what time was he parking the car last night, or how did he cut his hand? Why are his answers not short and straightforward like these ones are? Why does he feel the need to use all sorts of extra words when he's answering questions like that? Why does he feel the need to paint pictures like this?
So do you recall bleeding at all?
Yeah, I mean, I knew I was bleeding, but it was no big deal. I bleed all the time. I mean, I play golf and stuff. There's always something mixed and stuff here and there.
Detective Lang says to OJ, so do you recall bleeding at all? And OJ says, yeah, I mean, I knew I was bleeding, but it's no big deal. I bleed all the time. I play golf and stuff, so there's always something, nicks and stuff here and there. Now, I didn't know golf was a bloody sport, but apparently it is. Here, OJ wants us to think that him bleeding is a normal, everyday occurrence. Well, he wasn't asked, does he bleed all the time? He was asked, do you recall bleeding? And he says, yeah, I knew I was bleeding, but it was no big deal. You weren't asked if it was a big deal. Were you? Why are you telling us that your bleeding was no big deal? And then he says, I bleed all the time. I play golf and stuff. Again, he more than answers the question. He gives it information that he wasn't asked. But at the same time, he takes this one off in a different direction. He uses I mean once more, and he goes to talk about his life where there's no stress or pressure. I play golf. There's always something going on. And look at stuff comes up twice here. Stuff is a word that we can use to hide things, or we can use to create the impression that there's more there than there actually is in truth. And we say stuff because we don't have the exact words. You know, if he said, I play golf and I play baseball and I play American football, so I'm always getting nicks, I'd find that more believable than I play golf and stuff. And he's always getting something, nicks and stuff. So stuff is doing a lot of work for OJ here. I don't think he does get cut regularly at all. I think he's trying to give the impression that he bleeds regularly, but I don't think he does. And he's moved the answer into the general. Do you recall bleeding at all? Meaning, do you recall bleeding at all last night? And he says, yeah. And then he talks in general. I bleed all the time. You know, I play golf. I get nicks here and there. So he's gone away from the specific that he was asked to into the general again. Just keep an eye on when OJ says stuff.
So did you do anything? When did you put the Band-Aid on?
Actually, I asked the girl this morning for it.
In Chicago?
Yeah. Because last night I just I remember Cato was, he was saying something to me and I was rushing to get my phone. I put a little thing on it and stopped.
OJ's asked, so did you do anything? When did you put the Band-Aid on it? And OJ says, actually, I asked the girl this morning for it, Lang says, and she got it? OJ says, yeah, because last night with Cato, when I was leaving, he was saying something to me and I was rushing to get my phone and I put a little thing on it and it stopped. Does anyone know what that answer means? He was asked, when did you put the Band-Aid on it? I'm not entirely sure when he put the Band-Aid on it. Was it this morning when he asked the girl for it? Or was it last night when Cato was saying something to him? Whatever, Cato saying something to him, going to get my phone, totally irrelevant to the question. So once more, why say it? And he's repeated several times now that he was rushing to get his phone from the car. So I think this is something that he really wants to get across to the police, that he was only at his car, or he only returned to his car to get his phone out of the car. I said to you before, I haven't paid a lot of attention. I haven't done a lot of digging into the background of this story. So I'd suggest from his words, he's sensitive about the real reason that he went back to his car on the night in question. It wasn't to get his phone, but it's really important for him to say to the detectives, the only reason I went to my car was to get my phone. The only reason you'll find my blood anywhere near the car is because I went back to the car to get my phone. Other things I noticed here, I put a little thing on it, so it's not a big cut, it's just a little thing. Look, just another question from OJ where he's asked a straightforward question and he doesn't give a straightforward answer. When did you put the Band-Aid on it? He could have said, put one on it last night, changed it this morning. He could have said, this one, put on this morning when I left Chicago. But no, he gives a slightly rambling story full of irrelevant information to the question. We're at the end of the section about the cut on OJ's hand. I don't know how he got the cut on his hand because he doesn't tell us. He does want us to think that him bleeding is normal. He's more descriptive about how he reopened the cut in Chicago rather than the first time he got the cut. He seems to want to avoid talking about that quite a lot. He also talks about running around, rushing the night before, the phone thing. Does he need us to think he was in a hurry, or is this truthful? I'll tell you what OJ needs. He needs another question about the Bronco.
Do you have the keys to that Bronco? Yeah. Okay. We've impounded the Bronco. I don't know if you know that.
No.
Take a look at it. Okay. Other than you, who's the last person to drive that?
Probably, Gigi. When I'm out of town, I don't know who drives the car. Maybe my daughter, maybe.
Keys available?
I leave the keys there, when Gigi's there, because sometimes she needed it. Gigi was off and wasn't coming back until the day, and I was coming back tonight.
Yeah.
Van Atter asks, do you have the keys to that Bronco? Simpson says, yeah. Van Atter says, okay, we've impounded the Bronco. I don't know if you know that or not. OJ says, no. Van Atter says, we want to take a look at it. Other than you, who was the last person to drive it? OJ says, probably Gigi. When I'm out of town, I don't know who drives the car. Maybe my daughter, maybe Cato. Van Atter says, the keys are available. And OJ says, I leave the keys there, when Gigi's there because sometimes she needs it, or Gigi was off and wasn't coming back till today and I was coming back tonight. This feels all fairly straight and truthful. It does stray from the question. So is he wanting to make sure the detectives know lots of people have access to that car? He's done that before. So is it important for OJ, again, painting this huge picture of vagueness that he has been doing throughout this police interview? I'm not the only person that drives the Bronco. Lots of people drive the Bronco. And if you're asking me who did drive the Bronco, I don't know the answer to that.
You don't mind if Gigi uses it?
It's the only one I can let her use. And she doesn't have her car. So sometimes her husband takes her car. I let her use the car.
Vanata says to OJ, so you don't mind if Gigi uses it? Or OJ says, this is the only one I can let her use. When she doesn't have her car, because sometimes her husband takes her car, I let her use the car. I'm kind of fine with that answer, but it doesn't answer the question. You don't mind if Gigi uses it? No, not at all. It's her car to use. Or, yeah, I do. I wish she'd use her own car, but sometimes she borrows mine and she makes a real mess of it. But he doesn't say that. He says, she doesn't have her car. I'm nice OJ. I let her use my car. So now the detectives have covered his moves on the night and his car and his hand injury. They're going to go back to OJ's relationship with Nicole.
When was the last time you were at Nicole's house?
When was the last time you were at Nicole's house? OJ's answer is bizarre, and you can hear it in episode 4 of OJ Simpson in his words. So what have we learned in episode 3? Well, kind of not very much if you look at it. I don't know with the Bronco. I don't know who, when, or where that car was used the night before because the answers are so vague. The hand injury that the detectives noticed, I don't know how it happened or when it happened. Again, the answers were so vague. OJ has a story about the night before that he very much wants to tell, and he very much wants to repeat to make sure that story seems believable. And I feel that he's being deceptive, and I feel that he has some things that he really wants to get across to us, that he was rushing, that he was going to Paula's house, his girlfriend's house, and his phone in his car is very important to him. So what are you thinking now? Don't feel you have to think about this all alone. The more people you involve in this, the richer the conversations you can have. So share the podcast and discuss your thoughts with your friends and others in whichever community that you're in. You'll find the conversations you have with them after looking at words like this are fascinating. If you want to discuss it with me, email oj@neveratruerword.com. That's oj@neveratruerword.com. And the most thought-provoking observations and questions will be in the final episode of this podcast series. If you go to connect.neveratruerword.com, you can share your thinkings or ask questions on social media. And that email address and the social link, they are in the show notes, as is the Facebook group where there's some exclusive OJ content for you to look at and see if you can find out even more about what is going on in OJ's mind. And don't forget your pedantic friends. They will love this podcast. They will thank you for sharing it. In episode 4, the detectives ask, when was OJ last at Nicole's house and what was he doing there? OJ is going to discuss his problems that he has with Nicole. And if I'm not worried enough about how he cut his hand or what he was doing the night previously, when he talks about what he was wearing that night, it sets my alarm bells off. That's in episode 4 of OJ Simpson in his words.
Just did you do it?
No, I didn't.